Hello everyone, so where we are today is Chinatown in New York City. So this is Manhattan's Chinatown. So there are several Chinatowns in the New York area, but this is the original and the most famous. So it's a large area. It is in Lower Manhattan. Take a look at it on a map. It's actually a pretty large area. It has grown tremendously over the last several decades. It started at a very small point. We're gonna go through basically the main section along Mott Street. Right now we're on Canal Street. I'm gonna show you some of the restaurants, some of the stores, and give you a little bit about the history as well as we're gonna walk through it. One interesting note is if you look over here, see over there by the red building? That's the beginning of Little Italy, right? So Chinatown is pretty much adjacent to Little Italy. And you can see a big change in demographics as you switch from Mulberry Street to Mott Street, which is what we're gonna see here, right? So this is Canal Street. So one thing I do recommend is we are on Canal and Mott right now. If you go down a little bit more on Canal, Canal's in a large street. It connects to the Manhattan Bridge. If you go a little bit down on Canal Street, you can get some of the best deals in New York City. You can like haggle, you can get, it's the best place to get souvenirs for much cheaper than like by Times Square or in Midtown. So I strongly recommend going there. You could haggle with them, you can get the price like way lower than they say. Don't pay full price. So let's start, guys. Now, right now, you are in one of the oldest neighborhoods in New York City. And what I mean by oldest is it's one of the oldest inhabited parts of the city. So in Manhattan, the lower you go, the older it is. So like around Wall Street, so Lower Manhattan, where that area is, that is the oldest part of the city. So that's like where the original inhabitants of New York City settled. As you get up here, it's still very old. But what's interesting about around here, so the Lower East Side, Chinatown, Mulberry Street, all of that, Little Italy. Unlike Lower Manhattan, which largely is, you know, large skyscrapers now, right? It's completely built up and changed, mostly. The original architecture mostly still remains here. So you're gonna see a lot of really, really old tenement housing, right? So you're gonna see these big old brownstones where they used to cram like, hundreds of people into. This was the really first area that people, lived when they first came to the United States. If you check your family tree, a large amount of your family may have originated in this very area. So it's pretty interesting to note. Now, Chinatown in particular has had a Chinese population since the mid-1800s, right? So before that, there was a lot of Irish that were living in this area. One thing to note is Gangs of New York, the famous movie Gangs of New York, is actually in Chinatown, right? But it was before Chinatown really became a Chinese enclave, right? This was like 1850s, 1860s. Chinatown really started to grow the late 1800s. The first Chinese immigrant to settle in Chinatown was in 1850, and he was a cigar maker. And he encouraged a lot of, newer immigrants to come from China to this very area. One thing that's very interesting is that when Chinatown first started, by 1900, this area had 7,000 Chinese immigrants, 7,000 men, as according to the United States Census, and only about 100 women. So, and that continued until about 1965. That is when the United States lifted a ban on Asian immigration. If you don't know your history, there have been bans on certain kinds of people coming to the United States throughout its history. And there was a ban on Chinese immigration through a lot of American history. So, you know, once that was lifted in 1965, floods of Chinese immigrants started coming into this area. A lot of Chinese immigrants went to California on the West Coast because it's obviously geographically closer. But there was a lot of riots and a lot of racism that actually was making Chinese immigrants want to come to the East Coast. So that's kind of the original inhabitants. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit more about the history. It has a fascinating and very interesting history, but let's walk a little bit more.
A comer.
Hey guys, we had a little bit of a glitch in our camera, but we're going to continue the tour here, right? So if it seems like it skipped, there's a glitch in the camera, and we'll just continue here, so.
You guys, mit Chopsticks.
Okay guys, so why visit Chinatown? So Chinatown it's in the center of Manhattan, right? And Manhattan's known to be very expensive, very you know, trendy. It's one of the cheapest lunches, dinners, and bar areas you'll go in the city. So, you know, if you're interested in that, also if you like Chinese food, this is the place to go. So take a look at this. Spend a lot of money in Chicago.
Italian beef?
I think we all did one second.
Now, a little tip, when you're here in Chinatown, I encourage you to go down the side street. So this is Pell Street, right? So if you go down some of these little kind of alleyway side streets, you're gonna find more kind of off the beaten path restaurants. They're usually cheaper and they're usually a little bit more authentic. Mott Street, as cool as it is, has more expensive restaurants, right? Because sometimes people don't even leave the strip, if you want to call it. So as you can see, like I said, every turn you make, you're in kind of a new section, right? You're in a new area, and there's kind of a lot of little hidden things to be found as you explore Chinatown. One thing to note, like I said before, is we did not hit the whole Chinatown, right? So we hit the main strip, which is pretty much the intersection of Mott Street and Bayard Street, and then it goes out in all directions. If you walk 10 minutes in all directions, you're still going to be in a very Chinese enclave, right? And what's so cool about Chinatown is, for it being where it is in lower Manhattan, it still hasn't really gentrified yet. Now they are coming, right? So now it is getting more gentrified. There are more young professionals here. There are more hipster populations coming here. However, this kind of area doesn't really, it's not alluring to them that much. So this still pretty is, you know, pretty much is a very authentic part of Manhattan still. What you want to do when you come here is make sure you eat, make sure you take the subway. Parking can be very, very annoying around here. As you can see, the streets are very narrow, very small, almost alley-like, right? So I wouldn't recommend driving. You could drive, find a spot, get lucky, but I wouldn't particularly recommend it. I would prefer, if I was coming here, to take the subway. Now the NR, and W train come here, the J and Z train come here, and the 4 and 5 train come right along here. If you don't know how to use the New York City subway, check out my video about that. I have an excellent video teaching you how to use the New York City subway, how to navigate it, how to understand it. So definitely check that out. One other thing to note, so the Chinese population in the area is actually getting smaller. So a lot of the original inhabitants of Chinatown are moving to like Brooklyn's Chinatown, which is Sunset Park, Flushing, and Queens. So kind of more satellite Chinatowns located throughout the New York City area. You know, you guys, we're kind of coming up on the end of the tour here. If you like this content, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. You know, share this video, like this video, leave a comment or question below. I try to answer all questions I have. You know, if you've been here and you have some tips for other travelers, leave a comment below, and you know, let's help each other explore different places. Okay, so until next time, guys, take care.